Alrighty. Howdy, folks. Somehow I felt that I didn't do a proper job of clarifying the difference between the period, nominal, and effective interest rates. So I said, let me go ahead and do an addendum to what I already did. And so I came up with a few problems that my hope is that would all those examples would make things very clear. Okay, let's see. Let's see how successful I have been. Cool. If the interest rate is 12% per year compounded yearly, okay, 12% per year compounded every year. Good. Find the period interest rate I, nominal interest rate R, and the effective interest rate I effective. Okay. This is another reason I said, let's be very clear about all this stupid I, R, I effective, R over M, all these things. Let's be very clear about it. So that's why I'm trying to be, I'm trying to keep saying, uh, I'm trying, what? I'm, I'm trying, man, I can't form a sentence. So I'll keep trying to use these terms. Yeah, okay. So period interest rate I and all that. Okay. So what is it that we are given? What given interest rate is what? 12% per year compounded yearly. 12% per year compounded yearly. Right? That's what is given. So with that, now let's try to find the period interest rate I. And in parenthesis, I thought I'll indicate to you that you should be absolutely clear about this one. Period interest rate is always the interest per compounding period. What is the compounding period here? Compounded yearly, so the compounding period is 1 year. And so the period interest rate in this particular question should be the interest rate per year. Cool. That is what I would be. Okay. So number of periods per year. Uh, how many, when I say number of periods per year, I automatically mean number of compounding periods per year. Okay. How many compounding periods would we have? Well, it is compounded yearly, so there is just one compounding period. So m equals 1 in this case. Cool? All right. Now, compounding period or simply period is what? 1 year. Maybe should I have reversed them? Yeah. Okay. Compounding period is simply period. We don't say compounding period, we simply say period, but that refers to compounding period is 1 year. Okay. So period interest rate is what? I is what? Well, we are already given that this is 12% per year and the compounding period is 1 year. So the answer is simply this 12%, whatever was given, 12% per year, per period, per year in this case. Cool. So I is 12%, 0.12. But then let's move on to finding what the nominal interest rate R is. Nominal interest rate is always the interest per year. Unlike the period interest rate, which is the interest per compounding period, nominal interest rate is always stated per year. If it is given, wonderful. If not, go ahead and figure out what the interest rate is per year. Cool? Okay, since the given interest rate is already the interest per year, R is simply, what was the given rate? 12% per year. Yeah, so it's just 12%. Oh, you mean the period interest rate I and R are exactly the same? Yeah, in this case they are. Okay? All right. And how about the effective interest rate? Once again, effective interest rate is also always per year. Okay? So the period interest period, which may change, which may be a year, which may be a month, which may be a second, and so on. Whereas the nominal interest rate is always per year, and so is the effective interest rate. Cool. And we know what the formula is, right? We will use the formula for effective interest rate as I effective is 1 plus r over m to the m minus 1. Cool. This is not a continuous compounding case, so therefore we'll just use this simple formula. If it is a continuous compounded case, we would take the limit of this as m approaches infinity. That would be the difference. So I'll cover a case like that also. Okay. So I effective is 1 plus r over m to the m minus 1. And it's a matter of plug and chug. So here 1 plus 0.12 over 1, the quantity raised to 1 minus 1. And what does that turn out to be? Turns out to be the same 0.12. Oh, isn't this interesting? The period interest rate, the nominal interest rate, and the effective interest rate are all exactly the same in this case. That is because the given interest rate is per year and it is compounded yearly. For that special case, all three interest rates would be exactly the same. I suppose this is exactly why in the beginning, when all those concepts were being introduced, they just decided to talk about per year compounding, right? So things are not very complicated. But now that we grasp all the concepts, we are better off learning about these other kinds of interest rates as well. That's the whole idea. Okay, let's pick another one. I have 5 problems. If the interest rate is 12% per year compounded monthly, so the interest rate is still 12% as before per year, but the compounding time has changed, compounded monthly. So now find the period interest rate, nominal interest rate, and effective interest rate. So let's get on with it. Given interest rate is 12% per year compounded, per year compounded monthly. I need to fix this. Oh, shucks. Sorry about that. Monthly. Save. Okay. Interest rate is 12% per year, compounded monthly. Good. To find the period, which is always the interest per compounding period, which is in this case month, number of periods per year, compounding periods M. That's, would you agree, per month means 12? Okay. And compounding period or simply period is what? 1 month. Okay. And so period interest rate I, what is the interest per month is what we need to figure out. Since what is given is for the whole year, 12% per year, we just simply say 12%, the yearly interest rate divided by 12 months. And that gives you 1%. So the period interest rate I is 0.01 or 1%. Cool? All right. To find the nominal interest rate R, now is always the interest per year. Since the given interest rate is already the interest per year, you simply say R equals 12% or 0.12. Straightforward, right? Okay, effective interest rate. Now the compounding period has changed. In the previous problem, it was a 1 year. Now it is just 1 month. So the effective interest rate is going to change. And it is always, the effective interest rate is always the interest per year. And so once again, we'll use the formula. And now R is 0.12 over M. Notice this R over M is exactly the same as this I in this case. So 1 plus I, the quantity raised to M minus 1, or let's stick to this 1 plus R over M. Let's not change the formulas, but I just want you to understand that there is another way of writing this one, in at least in some cases. Okay. All right. So that is going to be 1 plus 0.12 over 12, which came from this 0.01 I, raised to 12 minus 1. And that turns out to be 12.68%. So needless to say, this is the interest per year. That is the effective interest rate per year because of the compounding, right? Had this, we saw that if the compounding period is 1 year, both the effective interest rate and the nominal interest rate would be exactly the same if the uh, compounding period is 1 year. However, when the compounding period is not 1 year, there would be a difference between the two rates. Okay. All right. Next, if the interest rate is 1% per month compounded monthly, 1% per month compounded monthly, find the period interest rate I, nominal interest rate R, and the effective interest rate I effective. Okay. Interest rate is what? 1% per month compounded monthly. That's the scenario. Cool. Number of periods per year? Monthly, so 12. Cool. Compounding period or simply period is what? 1 month. Period interest rate I is for one period, that is for 1 month. Well, luckily they already gave the given interest rate is already per month, so it is simply 1% or 0.01. Cool. All right. Next, to find the nominal interest rate. Okay. Since the given interest rate is the interest per month, R equals I times M in this case, right? What they said per period is 0.01. So there are 12 periods. So 0.01 times 12 is 12%. Okay. All right. To find the effective interest rate, again, we'll use the formula. We know R to be 12% and M to be 12. And this turns out to be exactly as the previous one, 12.68%, right? So that is because this nominal interest rate turned out to be 12% in this case, even though it was given as 1% per month. And so since this is the same as that, so it's all okay. I hope you get this idea. Now let's move on to continuous compounding and try to understand what in the world that is all about. If the interest rate is 12% per year compounded continuously, find the period interest rate I, nominal interest rate R, and the effective interest rate I effective. Okay. Interest rate is what? 12% per year, but compounded continuously. So, number of periods per year. How many periods do we have? Meaning compounding periods, do we have? What? For 1 month, there are 12 compounding periods. For 1 quarter, if it is compounded quarterly, we have 4 compounding periods in a year. But in this case, infinity, right? Okay. And what is the compounding period or simply period? So what is the period? Is it 1 month, 1 day, 1 second? Oh, 0 seconds. What? 0 seconds. That doesn't make any sense. So we are better off simply thinking of it as does not exist. There is no such thing as how do I detect it? So I don't know. For some reason, I'm choosing to call it as does not exist. But what I mean is kind of like zero. But then there may be division by zero, all kinds of issues like that. Anyway, so what is the period interest rate? What? For what period? For zero, what is the interest? Zero period. Again, I want to say it doesn't make any sense. There is no concept of period interest rate in a compounded constantly, compounded continuously. Is it constantly, compounded, constantly, or continuously? Yeah. Okay. Period interest rate also doesn't, in this case, does not exist. So in none of these calculations where things are compounded continuously, you could use this period interest rate I. And that is one of the main reasons why we find the effective interest rate. Okay. All right. To find the nominal interest rate, or okay, is that possible to do? Since the given interest rate is the interest per year, oh, they already gave that. So that is just simply 12%. And to find the effective interest rate, up until now, what were we doing? We were using that 1 plus r over m to the m minus 1. But then, since m is infinity, we are taking the limit, and I demonstrated that already, and the formula turns out to be I effective is e to the r minus 1. Okay? So, you definitely need to know what r is if you're talking about this continuous compounding case. Only then you can find the effective interest rate. So e to the r minus 1, e to the 0.12 minus 1, and that turns out to be 12.75%. Cool? All right. Next, the last problem. If the interest rate is 2% per quarter compounded continuously, find the period interest rate I, nominal interest rate R, and the effective interest rate I effective. Let's go. Interest rate given is interest rate is 2% per quarter compounded constantly or continuously. Okay. To find period interest rate I, let's do this. Number of periods per year compounded continuously, that is still infinity. Compounding period or simply period is 0 or does not exist. And period interest rate, there is no such concept of period interest rate for continuous compounding. However, can we find the nominal interest rate? Well, let's see. What is given is 2% per quarter, right? Since the given interest rate is the interest per quarter, how many quarters do we have in a year? 4. So we just simply say, uh-oh, shucks. The sequence of animations I messed up. So this is how I need to fix this. What is showing up as 19? Will you please forgive me for these errors? I would appreciate that. I'm sorry. Okay. Now let's go back to this. Yeah. Since the given interest rate is the interest per quarter, and there are 4 quarters in a year, we'll take the quarterly interest rate and multiply that by 4, and that's how we get R. Okay, and turns out to be 8%. Now, to find the effective interest rate, because this is compounded continuously, we'll use the special formula for I effective, which is e to the r minus 1. And so e to the 0.08 minus 1. And that turns out to be 8.329%. Cool. Man, I feel so much better because I was feeling sort of guilty. I think I didn't do a good job. And suddenly, as I was walking today, I said, maybe I'll create a, a document that explains these things perhaps a little more clearly. Alrighty, amigos y amigas, adios.